Hi folks, and welcome back to Innovation and IP Law. This is video 2 in the video series on licensing part 1. We will do part 2 in the licensing series next week. But in this first video series on licensing, we are looking at negotiation and we are looking at the preliminary stuff. In the first video, we did an overview and we also had a look at the big Macs of relational contracting, as I like to call them, Stuart McCauley and Ian McNeil. We had a little look at the McNeil's relational contracting continuum. And then I left you on a cliffhanger, ready and poised to discuss Friedlinger et al.'s approach to relational contracting and the process that they have developed in order to apply all of the good learnings from the big Macs in a very structured way to the problem of license negotiations. Well, not just license negotiations, actually their process applies to pretty much any contractual negotiation, but we're looking at it obviously just in terms of licensing and particularly licensing of technology and IP. So without further ado, let's look at Friedlinger. And here we have Friedlinger and his crew. That's David Friedlinger on the left, Jeanette Nyden down the bottom, and Kate Vidasek on the right there. There's a couple of other bods involved in the unpacking relational contracts white paper. That was Bergman and Cummins as well. But the first work that they did was led by Jeanette Nyden down the bottom there, and it was called Getting to We. That one was written by Nyden, Friedlinger and Vidasek, and that emerged in about 2013. The book has been very successful. What the title kind of alludes to is a runaway bestseller in the 80s when Gordon Gekko and his greed is good kind of atmosphere was around.
In the last 7 deals that I've been involved with, there were 2.5 million stockholders who have made a pre-tax profit of $12 billion. Thank you. The point is, ladies and gentlemen, that greed, for lack of a better word, is good. Greed is right. Greed works.
And that book was called Getting to Yes, written by Fisher and Urey. That book was incredibly successful in that era because it was such a fresh voice on the scene. Even though it's called Getting to Yes, negotiating agreements without giving in, it actually isn't quite as hard line as it sounds. And I guess one of the things it's most famous for is for encouraging a win-win mindset. So trying to achieve wins for both parties in a contract negotiation. And Fisher and Urey kind of described the main problem with negotiations as parties coming to the table really unprepared to think about anybody but themselves, really. And they come to the table, as I said at the beginning of the first video, with this shopping list of, I want this, I want that. Here is my position on this issue, this term, that term. And that positional negotiating stance really just tends to lead parties into the situation where they're just digging their heels in to try and maintain as many of their ideal positions in the negotiation as they possibly can. They talk about the different negotiating styles and the hard style or muscular style, where they just, hold out as long as possible and run roughshod over the other party. they try and use power over the other party and essentially exploit the other party, getting whatever they basically can. Then you have the soft negotiator that really wants to do the deal, and they end up giving in probably too much, more than they should. And so at the end of the day, if there is an agreement between the parties, it's going to be suboptimal, because the soft negotiator is going to feel rather exploited, and that they're not really getting the kind of bargain that they actually wanted. So after defining this problem of positional negotiating approaches, Fisher and Urey came up with 4 fairly important steps, key concepts to fix a party's negotiating approach so that you could arrive at a more win-win situation. And so their mantras were, firstly, separate the people from the problem. Remember I said to you, in the first video, constantly researchers found that unfortunately negotiations happen between people and people vary. There are some very nice people and there are some very difficult people, and unfortunately difficult people really tend to flourish in a negotiation arena, because they really do take on the whole exercise rather like a battle. And obviously that ticks everybody else off in the room and starts to polarize. And so Fisher and Urey say, look, you've got to try as much as you can to focus and stay focused on the problem in front of you. What are the issues on the table? How can the parties work together to solve the problem that's on the table? The second one is focus on interests, not positions. And that's obviously a direct answer to the main problem that Fisher and Urey saw. So here we have the parties are encouraged to explain the drivers for their actions. Both parties come to the table with a shopping list of things that they want, but instead of jumping straight in, diving straight in and talking about what it is that they want, which usually happens, Fisher and Urey say, look, explain yourself, explain what it is, the interests and the drivers that are leading your party to the positions that they wish to adopt. And really, where you have this focus on understanding drivers, then it becomes much easier to negotiate your way through a thicket of issues, because you haven't got that kind of lock-in that tends to happen when you dig your heels in and you just say, this is my position and I'm not moving from it, or not far from it. So that's the second one. The third one was invent options for mutual gain. Here's your win-win kind of mantra that Fisher and Urey encourage parties to take. Very different from the usual mindset, as I said, in the glorious heyday of the 80s, the greed is good kind of thing. It was quite a refreshing voice, actually, to hear, very well-respected business researchers saying, look, you've got to find something in it for both parties. The other thing that they said was use objective criteria. Wherever there's a conflict on issues, if you can get your hands on something objective that would tell you which way you need to go, that's what you need to be looking for, rather than just doggedly making your argument repeatedly. If you can find some kind of objective criteria, both parties will perceive that as more fair and more acceptable. That's a very, very short description of Fisher and Urey. It's actually quite a short book, so, and I don't think it's available in the CPU library, but if you do get a chance to get your hands on a copy, it's a worthwhile read. As I said, very short. So, yeah, bit of like bedtime reading. The other main point from Fisher and Urey that I just wanted to quickly explain was their concept of the BATNA, B-A-T-N-A, best alternative to a negotiated agreement. So what they say is before any negotiations go on, you need to be thinking through what it is that your firm, your organisation really wants from the deal, and how far they can flex one way or another. The things on the wish list that are expendable, and the things that are absolutely not expendable, and what your minimum acceptable criteria for the deal are. And once you know that, you obviously have done your research, and you've said, if we go below that particular level of acceptable criteria for us, it actually means that the deal is no longer feasible for us, and it would actually pay us to pursue a different option, either go with a different party or go with a different strategy and different technology, different business opportunity. So that's their concept of BATNA, very famous now in business literature. So getting to we, as I said, fast forward 30 odd years, and getting to we is kind of like the modern take on getting to yes. However, it's got a far more unabashed focus on relations, and it really does place relations above all else in the negotiation field. I'm not going to discuss getting to we too much because it is available in the CQU library, and the guts of it, to put things eloquently, was taken out and plopped into an IACCM, the International Contract Management Association white paper that came out in about 2016, I think it was, and they've really written this white paper much like a blueprint or a manual for parties that are actually going to be going out and doing the negotiations themselves. And so most of the important stuff from getting to we is in this short manual, which I've set for your reading this week. But nevertheless, the Getting to We book does have a really good discussion on trust. And if you're going to read anything from Getting to We, I would probably suggest reading the initial parts of the book on trust. The rest of it you can probably take from the manual. Interestingly, in Getting to We, they say that part of building trust involves transparency. And interestingly, as I said, they tend to suggest that the most transparent, the most disclosure that you can give to the other party will be the best. Most is the best. I don't know if that makes sense, but they say, look, if you're going to assume that the other party is sitting at the table with good intentions, better to disclose than not disclose if they've requested something. And if you're worried about risk, then manage that risk with a good non-disclosure agreement, a confidentiality agreement. And we'll look at confidentiality agreements just at the end of this video series. So it's interesting, whilst they very squarely focus on relations, in terms of building relations, the transparency factor is important for trust, but they're saying, well, if you're having worries about that, then use a contractual mechanism, a non-disclosure agreement, to shore up your position. So it's certainly not this book. It's not all about the soft and fuzzies. It is certainly about using both relations and contract harmoniously together to manage uncertain, complex relationships, contractual relationships of exchange. They even say, in terms of building trust, you should be disclosing your BATNA to the other side, which I think a lot of parties would recoil in horror at. But have a read of that little section if you have time. See what you think. I'm not sure that there's too many commercial parties I know of that would probably go so far as to show their BATNA to the other side. But where you are looking at really super long-term, very expensive, highly complex contracting, and here I'm thinking of the case studies that we've got this week, like the Navy FFG enterprise that these authors were involved in. Millions of dollars, multiple millions of dollars each year were saved. I think they said about $28 million was saved by doing their contracting this way. Where you've got such high stakes, it really does make sense, as they did in the FFG enterprise, to make an enterprise with all of the parties buying into getting on board with the notion that everyone's all in it together. And if that's the level of relationship between the parties, then it doesn't make any sense to hold back something like a BATNA, because all of the parties are in it together. And so that's getting to we. As I said, following on a few years later, we have the blueprint or the manual called Unpacking Relational Contracts. Now, written in very nice, easy peasy, business friendly language, this one, so should make for fairly easy reading this week. The 5 steps that Friedlinger et al. Talk about in Unpacking Relational Contracts is firstly, focus on the relationship, not the deal. So there is number 1, out of the starting blocks, bang, you're away. First focus must be on the relationship. What's involved with this step? In fact, it's interesting. This step is not really, it's not what the label sounds like. What the parties are meant to be doing at this step is doing an internal stocktake, identifying everybody that's going to be involved in the process of getting this partnership, this collaboration underway, and making sure that they're all on board with the organisation's goals and objectives. And by getting everybody on board, marshalling the troops, if you will, you can speak more effectively and with more of a unified voice when the negotiations are actually happening. So that's the first thing. Also, the other mindset issue that they discuss in this step is making sure that the focus for seeking a partner is not just what you can get from the partner, but the relational qualities in the partner entity themselves. So you're not just looking for a collaboration partner that has the right technology or has the right expertise, but you're also looking for a collaborative partner that has the similar kinds of approach and a compatibility, if you will, to your organisation's goals and objectives. So you really are looking beyond the technical or knowledge related, requirements related kind of approach, and you're looking more at a relational focus right from the get-go. So the first step really is about marshalling the troops, getting the troops on board, and making sure they're all focused on relational matters and firm objectives and goals. Well, we've just managed to cover off the first of the 5 steps, and surprisingly we are already nearly at the just over the 20-minute mark. So I'll end this video here and I'll skip across to video 3, and we can discuss the last 4 steps of Friedlinger et al.'s relational contracting approach, and a few of the other preliminary items and things that we needed to cover off for this week. So until then, bye for now, guys.